Hello, my name is Julia Masterman, and I am the Science Education and Outreach Coordinator for Quasi. Today I'm going to be talking about cloud-based data tools for research, collaboration, and workflow documentation in the aquatic sciences, specifically JupyterHub and HydroShare. Cloud-based tools for data analysis and modeling can expedite workflow documentation, aid in the communication and reproducibility of your science, and enable collaboration. Quasi leverages these capabilities to provide computing tools to the water science community to complete data visualization and analysis on data uploaded to its data repositories, HydroShare and HydroClient. Before I dive into HydroShare and the associated web-based apps, I want to give a little bit of background on Quasi. Quasi stands for the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Science Incorporated, but the Quasi community extends beyond just the traditional hydrology sphere. Water science research is inherently disciplinary. There are 140 member institutions of Quasi, but the Quasi community is even larger. Quasi provides services that are used by students, educators, researchers, citizen scientists, professional scientists, and more in a range of disciplines, all passionate about water science. ESA is part of this community too. If you're involved in water research, welcome. Quasi is primarily funded by the National Science Foundation to advance water science through the development of programs and services to strengthen collaboration and data accessibility within the water science community. In addition to the data services I'll be talking about today, Quasi has a range of community services, including workshops, webinars, and funding opportunities available. Feel free to check out our website or reach out for more information. Quasi data resources and tools are open source, often web-based, and available to everyone. HydroShare is an online collaborative data repository for sharing and publishing water science data and models. It can be used as a tool for research and publishing at any stage of the data lifecycle. There are thousands of biogeochemical, hydrologic, geographic, and other data sets that are available for immediate download with clear metadata and citation information. HydroShare was built with collaboration in mind. Users can privately share resources with colleagues and collaborate using web-based tools, which I'll describe more in a moment, before publication. When the time comes, resources can be made public and discoverable on HydroShare and be given a DOI that can be used in publication. But the specific feature of HydroShare that we'll be focusing on today are the web apps. HydroShare web apps are hosted on a separate web server from the HydroShare website, which is hydroshare.org, and access HydroShare resources using web services via the REST Application Programmer's Interface, or API. This slide lists Quasi's approved web apps that are supported as a part of HydroShare. Today I'll primarily be focusing on Quasi JupyterHub. Workflow documentation is necessary for reproducible science, but documenting analysis workflow can be time-consuming and difficult. Communicating what you did to others or replicating an analysis performed earlier can be complicated if people are on different systems or you're using a different hardware configuration or software configuration. Even sometimes trying to replicate an analysis later on your own machine often comes with its own set of challenges. It can be incredibly frustrating if documentation is unclear. Good workflow documentation results in analysis that's reproducible. So what is needed is somewhere to save data, models, and code in one place so that you know that the data that you're pulling from is the same data you're always pulling from. Somewhere you can share these resources privately with collaborators and track and update them over time. And perhaps have integrated tools to allow you to run code in your browser, bypassing the complications of differing computing environments on individual machines, which makes analysis easily reproducible later on and allows others to interact with your code more easily. Now we're going to do a brief demo using JupyterHub notebooks and HydroShare. This is a demo exercise in HydroShare that explores temperature data from 2 sites near Seattle. The purpose of this demo is to show the capabilities of JupyterHub notebooks and HydroShare, but if you're interested later on, this resource has been made public and you can walk through it yourself on HydroShare. This is a typical HydroShare resource. You can see the author, Anthony Castronova, who's the quasi-hydrologist, and the sharing status was private at the time when this was recorded, but is now public. It contains both a dataset and a markdown file for code, so it's a composite resource, meaning it contains multiple file types, and there's a link to cite this resource. There's an abstract and metadata on this home page of this resource when you scroll down. The first step is to click Open With and select Quasi JupyterHub. Then we come to this page where we can select our computing environment. JupyterHub software can create custom computing environments in the cloud that will create individual but identical computing environments for all users. So if all of you listening attach this resource or launch this resource at the same time, you would not all be in the same computing environment. So this facilitates sharing code and accessibility. So if you're using something like this for a workshop or a classroom setting, every student and user would be able to complete the same activity simultaneously. Each of these custom environments are loaded already with packages relevant to different workflows, and so you can choose which one is going to work best for your project. You'll also notice that there's some options to choose an environment that's in Python or in R. So by doing this, we're leveraging languages that people already know so they can choose which environment they want to work in on the cloud in their browser without having to pre-install any sort of software or user interface like RStudio or Jupyter Notebook. This markdown file was originally written in Python, so we're going to choose the Python scientific environment. So now our resources are being downloaded from HydroShare into this new environment that we just created. And you can go back to your page in HydroShare to see what those resources are. See, we have a data file and then a markdown file. And you see they've already loaded in this JupyterHub environment. So we're going to click on the code file. So here is the lab view of this markdown file. So a markdown file contains both text, so the title, its subdescription, as well as blocks of code that you can be run one at a time. So first what we're going to do is install some packages just to make sure that they're all set, and then load them into our workspace. And then we're going to load the data that we had stored in that HydroShare resource into this coding workspace. And then we can preview that data here. And so here is the data set that we had saved as a file in our HydroShare resource, and now it is in our coding workspace. So now we know that our data made it over from HydroShare, and we're going to save that into memory and create a Python object, which we can preview here, of that CSV data set. This is showing temperature at 2 different sites, one in the mountains and one closer to the city of Seattle. The next thing we're going to do is visualize these field sites graphically, or I guess geographically, using some more code. So here we see the 2 sites that this workshop is focusing on, and you can see that they're in the Seattle area. The next step is to just extract the data from this data set that we're interested in. In this case, we're going to be looking at the maximum, minimum, and average temperatures. Next, we're going to graph the maximum temperature for the first field site here. And you can see it's showing all of the data over time, and for the second field site here. Next, we're going to create a new column, and we're going to pivot our data so that we have just the month value for each point in the record. So we're going to create a new set of data that just has the maximum temperature sorted by month. Using that, we can create a box and whisker plot that shows the maximum temperature by month for the entire record for one of the field sites. You'll also see that in the upper left, under name, there's a new resource that's been created called Mount Craig Max Temp. That object is going to be where the data sorted by month is stored. And then we'll do the same thing again for the other site. So create this box and whisker plot by month. So this was just a brief example of some initial data exploration that you might do when you're first investigating a data set. But even within this brief data exploration exercise, we created a new Python object where we sorted the entire record by month. And we were able to gain some valuable insight into how these two sites differ in terms of their trends by month over the year for the entirety of the record. So say you want to save that Python object so you don't need to run this analysis again, and you just have the data sorted by month. So there's an integrated command that will interface between the Jupyter Notebook and HydroShare so that this Python object, this spreadsheet of data, is saved back into HydroShare so that you can use it for other analyses later on. That's what you see happening on the screen here. So we're creating a new resource in HydroShare that contains this data. Within this command in the Jupyter Notebook, we can identify keywords, write an abstract, give the resource a title, and also identify which files or objects we want to be added to that resource. Once that information has been identified, we have this bash command, hscreate or HydroShare create, that actually creates the resource and gives you the hyperlink to your resource in HydroShare, which if we go to that link now, here we are. Here's the maximum temperature by month for Mount Crag, which was the site in question, and you can see it's automatically private. The author is the same author who is your user profile, and here you see the content and citation information for that new set of data. So that was just a very brief example of some of the capabilities of Quasi JupyterHub for enabling reproducible science. Thank you for your participation today. My contact information is on the slide if you'd like to reach out. This talk has been part of the Data Help Desk at ESA 2020. I hope that you'll join us for our question and answer hours at a virtual Career Central to have your questions answered by one of our many data experts. Thanks.